Hey, want to make $1 million? It's easy. Just run a highly profitable illegal business. Am I talking about selling drugs, illegal weapons, or stolen goods? But how did they do it? Well, that's what we'll explain right now. Nope. I'm talking about extortion. The mob has been making millions this way for decades. And today, we're going to tell you how. For those who don't know much about them, the Mafia is an Italian criminal organization founded in Sicily in the 19th century. They were originally a secret society known as the Sicilian Mafia. However, after the unification of Italy in 1861, they had no purpose and became outlaws. In others, the mere threat is enough to get the money without any violence taking place. In some cases, it may only be a few $100s. In others, it may be tens of thousands. It all depends on what the Mafia thinks they can get away with. Oftentimes, the Mafia will claim that they're protecting the business from other criminals. But in reality, they're just collecting money for doing nothing at all. From Las Vegas to New York, the mob has made billions by threatening people into giving them money. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode where we bring you all the inside stories of the criminal underworld, from the Russian mob to the Japanese Yakuza and everybody in between. Usually, the Mafia targets people who they think are vulnerable, such as immigrants who don't speak English or people who own businesses in high-crime areas. They want someone desperate for protection, so they're more likely to agree to pay up. Lucky Luciano is one of the most infamous mobsters of all time. Fled to Italy, where he lived until his death in 1962. He was the boss of the Luciano crime family in New York City. From an early age, Luciano was involved in crime. In 1934, Brackett was charged with extortion and bribery. He was accused of paying off several corrupt officials, including police officers and politicians. He was arrested several times for various offenses before he turned to extortion. He was involved in a number of violent crimes, including murder, kidnapping, and robbery. However, he was released early in 1964. After his release, he went back to his criminal ways and was soon arrested again. He threatened to expose his connection to the Sessa clan unless he paid him a large sum of money. He was eventually sentenced to 5 years in prison for his own crimes. However, upon his release, he was immediately arrested again and sent back to jail. He was particularly active in the construction industry and was known for shaking down contractors and developers. Luciano, on the other hand, continued to operate his criminal empire with impunity. He was involved in a number of illegal activities, including gambling, drug trafficking, and murder. Brackett complied and paid Luciano several $1,000s. However, he soon realized that he couldn't keep up with the payments and went to the police. Barbero was one of the most feared mobsters of his time, and his reign of terror came to an end in 1981 when he died of cancer. He was released early in 1963 and returned to his criminal activities. However, he was arrested again in 1966 and convicted of tax evasion. In the 1920s and 30s, he built up a vast criminal empire that engaged in all sorts of illegal activities, including gambling, prostitution, and narcotics trafficking. In the early 1930s, Brackett was one of the most successful men in the movie industry. He had produced or co-produced some of the biggest hits of the era, including several films starring George Raft. If you want to learn more about the criminal underworld, be sure to check out our other videos. Thanks for watching. Luciano was also involved in extortion. Today, we are discussing the Mafia and their crime empire of extortion, so stay tuned. These threats can be made in person or over the phone. If you are ever approached by someone demanding money under threat of harm, you should contact the police. Don't try to handle the situation yourself. You're likely to get hurt. The Mafia may start harassing the target, showing up at their home or business unannounced, making phone calls, or even vandalizing their property. In some cases, the Mafia has even resorted to violence when someone refuses to pay up. Sometimes they can even be made anonymously. The Mafia doesn't want to reveal themselves, because that would make it easier for the police to catch them. To better understand this crime, we must first look at how the Mafia works. Either way, the group adapted to its new circumstances and continued to grow. By threatening people into giving them money, the Mafia can earn millions of dollars every year. This is why they often target immigrants and vulnerable people. They know that these people are more likely to comply with their demands because they have little to lose. Soon they were extorting money from landowners, and when that dried up, moved on to the lucrative business of bootlegging during the Prohibition era in the United States. The word mafia itself may have come from the word onorata, meaning honorable, or it could be derived from the Arabic word makabasa, meaning head of the table. They didn't just stop at that, though. Once the ban on alcohol was repealed in 1933, they moved on to other criminal activities such as gambling and prostitution. These two activities are still major sources of income for organized crime groups today. So how does extortion work exactly? To put it simply, extortion is the act of obtaining something, usually money, through force or threats. The most common form of extortion is protection money. As the name suggests, this involves criminals threatening a business owner to protect them from harm, and in return, they demand a sum of money. In some cases, the mafia may actually carry out their threats and harm the business owner if they refuse to pay. The amount of money demanded can vary depending on the circumstances. Now let's take a look at how the mafia carried this out. The first step is identifying a target. Once they've identified a target, the mafia will start making threats. If the target doesn't comply and pay the money, then things can escalate quickly. As you might imagine, extortion is a very profitable business for the mafia. It's one of the main ways they make their money. The good news is that extortion is a crime that can be prosecuted. Now that we've covered how extortion works, let's take a look at some of the most famous cases involving the mafia. Lucky Luciano. He was arrested in 1936 and sentenced to 50 years in prison, but he was released early in 1946. After his release, Charles Lucky. Luciano was born on November 24, 1897 in Italy. His family immigrated to the United States when he was a child and settled in Manhattan. One of Luciano's most notorious extortion schemes involved Hollywood producer and director Charles Brackett. However, Brackett was also involved in some unsavory dealings. He was a member of the notorious Sessa Group, a powerful mafia clan based in Manhattan. Luciano saw an opportunity to make some easy money and began extorting Brackett. Despite the evidence against him, Brackett was unable to get Luciano convicted. Frank Thierry. Frank Thierry was a member of the Genovese crime family and one of the most ruthless mobsters of his day. In 1957, he was convicted of racketeering and extortion and sentenced to 15 years in prison. This time, he was charged with conspiring to extort money from a number of businessmen. Thierry served his time at the U.S. State Penitentiary Marion and was released in 1974. He lived a relatively quiet life after his release and avoided getting arrested again. Joseph Barbera. Joseph Barbera was the boss of the Bonanno crime. His family from 1959 until his death in 1981. Barbera was also a major player in the mafia's extortion racket. In 1960, Barbera was convicted of extortion and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but served only 18 months before being released. We hope you enjoyed learning about the mafia and their crime empire of extortion.